To expound on a video I presented from my car the other day, I'd like to have this conversation. There have been countless videos and other platforms that have promoted the idea that for us to solve the present issues in racial divide in this country, we have to have conversations. I agree with that statement completely. What I find, though, is that the conversations are one-sided. While these conversations on the surface seem meaningful, they are truly only seen through the eyes of one, only presenting one side of the problem. For the conversations for racial unrest to end, all sides must be willing to admit they are wrong and have bias. Yet what I see and hear is that while one side is asked to see their bias, the other side ignores its own bias and prejudices. This does not result in a conversation. It results in pointing that the reason and cause for the problem only exist in one direction. The logical fallacy for this is called stacking the deck. This is where evidence that supports an opposing argument is simply rejected or ignored. There has been, over the past few weeks, a set of videos presented by a man by the name of Emmanuel Acho. They are titled Difficult Conversations with a Black Man, and while I firmly believe that his intention is for these videos to create an open dialogue, whether he is conscious of it or not, he is leaving out and ignoring issues that might make him feel uncomfortable. You know, while making a long-distance shot with a rifle, you have to take multiple things into consideration. Weight of the bullet, velocity of the bullet, length of the barrel, whether the barrel is hot or the barrel is cold, the angle, the wind direction, the temperature. You ignore any one of these and you'll miss your mark. If our mark is to achieve peace through these conversations, we cannot ignore or overlook anything, even if it makes us feel uncomfortable. One of the first statements that Mr. Acho made that caught my attention is when he said, "We have to be anti-racist, obviously. As Black people, we have always been." Now, while I'll agree that there are times in our history where the Blacks have bore the brunt of racial injustice and racism in our country, it cannot be argued that they cannot be racist. This is a straw man argument. Just today, I watched videos of people being dragged out of their cars and beaten because they were white. I watched a lady have racial slurs thrown at her and she was threatened because she was white. He said in a conversation with Matthew McConaughey, "You," referring to white people, "have to acknowledge implicit bias." I've heard this put other ways where it says, "You're inherently racist if you're white." At its core, racism is judging someone based upon their race, or in today's culture, the color of their skin. Statements like these imply that because of the color of my skin, without knowledge of my actions or my character, you're making the judgment that I am racist. That in itself is a racist statement. He goes on further in a conversation with the family of Chip and Joanna Gaines, and he points out that if you see a Black man or a white man standing in front of you, because you are white, you are inherently more fearful of the Black man. Once again, he is judging people based on the color of their skin, not their character or the knowledge or their hearts or their minds. Then one of the children asked him a difficult question. "Are you afraid of white people?" Well, Mr. Acho chuckles and says, "I'm not afraid of white people. Let's just say I'm cautious of white people." Now, we fly past this statement because it sounds non-threatening, and Mr. Acho is a very likable man. What no one is asking or pointing out is that Mr. Acho is failing to recognize that he too has bias. He is cautious of certain people solely based on the color of their skin. Mr. Acho then makes a point that whiteness can be weaponized. He uses the example of a white woman who called 911 on a Black man who asked her to leash her dog and told them he was threatening her life. Was this a blatant racist act? It appears to be. But then he goes on to say there are many more examples of whiteness being weaponized. No one asks, what about Blackness being weaponized? We've seen this many times. A person has said something in their past that might have been considered or was racist. And it doesn't matter if it was yesterday, 5 years ago, or 10 years ago. They lose their jobs or are forced to resign from their positions. No one takes into consideration that perhaps their views have evolved. It doesn't matter if they've apologized or repented from this behavior. If the mob wants you removed, they weaponize Blackness and they have you removed. Let me give you a personal example, and it happened 15 years ago. My wife was employed as a leader as a supervisor, a director in a company. When my wife is at work, she's all business. She doesn't mess around, and she expects the people working under her to be all business too. There was a black lady who worked for her who was insubordinate and unproductive. At one point, she caught her falsifying records, and so she terminated her. This black lady went to upper management and made the claim that my wife was being racist. She threatened to get a lawyer and to sue. And as a result, with no other evidence of racism existing or bias in my wife's part, she was still terminated. This woman was weaponizing her blackness. We have people kneeling down before men feeling guilty for being white because we have weaponized blackness. We both have to recognize that we have fault in this arguments. If we're going to have difficult conversations, if we're going to have conversations that move forward, all parties need to admit and discuss that there are bias on both sides. We cannot hide the truth that racism is found in all colors. We are all made in the image of God, and the only thing that divides us is the amount of melanin we have in our cells. God offers redemption and grace to all, regardless of color. Total and absolute reconciliation between people, black, white, brown, pink, or red, can only happen at the cross. It's only through the blood of Christ that we have the power to change hearts. See, I'll continue to say that we cannot change minds until we change hearts. We cannot change hearts until we are truthful with one another. We cannot change hearts until we really have difficult conversations. But at its core, we cannot change hearts without God. It says in Scripture, with man, this is impossible. With God, all things are possible.